Welcome to the cabin. Today we're returning to the Volgan War and painting some more A.B.C. warriors from Warlord Games. Let's get to it. I had a blast painting the starter set for A.B.C. warriors on the channel a few months ago. Recently, Warlord Games generously sent us the entire collection of miniatures released for the game so far. This includes 3 boxes each from Wave 1 and Wave 2, featuring a mix of Volgan War droids and A.B.C. warriors. A big thank you to Kieran and the rest of the team in Nottingham for their support. Oh, and don't forget to check out our affiliate link to Warlord Games in the description down below. Starting with the Volgan Yaks, this box includes 2 of these little flying menaces. I prepared and painted all the models in today's video using the same methods and colors as before, resulting in a chrome base to work from. If you haven't seen that video, click the link on screen now. Painting the Yaks was quite straightforward. I mixed Tamiya Smoke and Tamiya Clear Green in a 2:1 ratio, diluted with about 40% X20A thinner. This is how I always dilute the Tamiya colors, whether using a normal paintbrush or my airbrush. For the wings and stripes, I applied a 2:1 mix of Tamiya Clear Yellow and Tamiya Clear Orange in the same way. This was followed by Tamiya Clear Red for the engines and faces. After sponging on some Runefang steel and applying a gloss varnish, something I'll do for all the rest of the miniatures as well, the Yaks were complete. I also based today's models in the same way as before. Well, that was a quick and easy paint job. Let's move on to something bigger. The next box contains Mongrol, a huge Frankenstein's monster of bits and pieces who likes to smash things. He's accompanied by a fellow Robo-Paratrooper. I masked off the parts of Mongrol's body that I wanted to keep silver with Tamiya masking tape and Vallejo liquid mask, and then used my airbrush to paint the shoulder pads with a 2:1 mix of Tamiya Smoke and Tamiya Clear Blue. The arms, head, and a few of the other armor panels received a 2:1 mix of Tamiya Clear Yellow and Tamiya Clear Orange. I then went back with pure Tamiya Clear Orange and selectively shaded these areas. After that, I painted the small details such as the eyes and symbols, and I'll show you later what colors I used for those. I also added some enamel paints for weathering, and I'll show you how I did this when we get to Mek Quake. For the Robo-Paratrooper, I airbrushed on a 2:1 mix of Tamiya Clear Blue and Tamiya Clear Red. The pouches and straps were base coated with Abaddon Black. I then highlighted them with Ashen Grey, followed by Dawnstone, and finally a selective highlight with Grey Sear on the corners. For the symbols on the shoulder pads, I added another highlight of Ulthuan Grey. The eyes were painted green, and I'll show you in the next segment what colors I used for those. That's the second box all done. I like the sprinting pose of the Robo-Paratrooper, and Mongrol is really an impressive miniature. I think the sculptor really managed to capture the visual impact that he has in the comics. Let's get back to the Volgan army now, and take a look at some of their sinister characters. This box includes Blackblood, Raz-Putin, and Ghengiz, 3 insidious commanders working for Volgan. I started with the last 2 as they share a few similar details. Their cloaks were base coated with Gal Vorbak Red. I then added Abaddon Black to the paint to create a 1:1 mix, which I diluted with Lamian Medium and applied in the deeper parts of the folds. I used the same method for the subsequent layers, adding Corn Red to the base coat in a 1:1 mix, and then Corn Red on its own. Next, I added Wazdaka Red to the Corn Red, and finally some thin lines of pure Wazdaka Red. To bring everything together, I applied a filter of Flesh Terror's red, diluted with a lot of contrast medium. Raz-Putin's lower body is a floating orb with an eerie glow. I base coated this, as well as his eyes, with warpstone glow. Once again, I applied subsequent layers of diluted paint with brighter and brighter colors, starting with a mix of moot green and the base coat. This was followed by moot green on its own, and then moot green mixed with Dorn yellow. For the final highlight, I used pure Dorn yellow selectively. To bring it all together, I added a filter of Striking Scorpion diluted with contrast medium. I base coated both of their swords with Cacophony Purple. I actually went for darker colors for the highlights, starting with Genestealer Purple. This is to simulate that the fire is hottest closest to the blade and gets colder as the flames are lashing out. Next up, I used Xereus Purple, gradually moving further and further out towards the edges of the flames. For the final highlight, I chose Cantor Blue. At this point, I wanted to add even brighter colors closer to the blade, so I diluted Fulgrim Pink and applied it as a pin wash in the recesses. This was followed by White Scar in the same way, but even more selectively. I also used these colors to paint the eyes of Ghengiz and a few red paints for the stars on his chest. I'll show you what colors I used when we get to Steelhorn. For Raz-Putin's symbol on the forehead, I applied a 2-to-1 mix of Tamiya Clear Orange and Tamiya Clear Red. Let's take a look at Blackblood now, the leader of the Straw Dogs. For his armor panels, I used a 2-to-1 mix of Tamiya Clear Yellow and Tamiya Clear Green. His hat, boots, gloves, belt, and headcloth were painted the same way as the black details on the Robo-Paratrooper. I also painted the golden symbols at this stage, and I'll show you what colors I used later when we get to Steelhorn. I then applied Averland Sunset as a base coat on the fringes of his uniform. These were shaded with Reichland Fleshshade. For the first highlight, I went with Iriel Yellow. And as a final selective highlight, I used Dorn Yellow. His pouches were painted with the same colors I used for the handle on Howard Quart's umbrella in the last video, and his eyes were painted like Raz-Putin's. Again, I'll show you what colors I used for the red details when we get to Steelhorn. All that was left at this point was the fire burning in his cup of oil. I base coated this with Phalanx Yellow. Then, just like with the flames on the swords, I highlighted them with a darker color, which in this case was Troll Slayer Orange. After that, I applied Evil Sun Scarlet more selectively. To simulate smoke, I added some Abaddon Black towards the very tips of the flames. Finally, I diluted White Scar and applied this in the recesses to represent the hottest parts. That's another box done. I'm quite happy with how the flames turned out, and Raz-Putin has an appropriately mystical appearance floating about in mid-air. Blackblood is looking treacherous as ever, about to take a sip from the burning oil of fallen A.B.C. warriors. We certainly need to paint some more heroes so they can fight back against these villains. The next box contains 3 A.B.C. warriors, the big, patriotic Steelhorn, the well-dressed marksman Joe Pineapples, and the tiny sewage droid Rojaws. Let's start with Steelhorn. I painted his armor panels with Tamiya Clear Blue, leaving some parts silver. The symbols on his shoulder pads were painted with a 2-to-1 mix of Tamiya Clear Yellow and Tamiya Clear Orange. I base coated his shields with White Scar. For the red stripes, I used Mephiston Red as a base coat. And for the blue field, as well as the eyes, I applied Calidor Sky. I then shaded the whole shields with Nuln Oil and cleaned up the base coats a bit. Following that, I highlighted the red stripes with Evil Sun Scarlet. And for the final highlight, I used Wild Rider Red selectively. I highlighted the blue field with Lothern Blue, followed by Baharoth Blue as a selective highlight. I painted the top of his head in a slightly different shade of blue, starting with Temple Guard Blue as a base coat. After that, I used Lothern Blue to highlight the area, followed by a 1-to-1 mix of Lothern Blue and Blue Horror. I then applied Blue Horror on its own, and for the final highlight, I chose White Scar. To bring it all together, I used a filter of Talassar Blue diluted with a lot of contrast medium. His hammer was painted with the same colors using the airbrush. I also painted some forks of lightning on it with a normal brush. For the armor on Joe Pineapples, I applied a 2-to-1 mix of Tamiya Clear Blue and Tamiya Clear Red. His vest, pouches, and sunglasses were painted the same way as the black details on the Robo-Paratrooper. And for the yellow arrows on his head and sniper, I used the same colors as the fringes on Blackblood's uniform. I also painted the targeting lens on the sniper with the same colors as Steelhorn's red stripes, but with a dot of White Scar in the corner. The tires and eyes on Rojaw's were painted in the same way as the black and red details I've already shown you. That was pretty much it for him, except for some enamels to dirty him down. Like I mentioned before, I'll show you how I did this when we get to Mek Quake. That's all the good guys done. Steelhorn surprised me, as this turned out to be one of the most fun miniatures to paint. I'm looking forward to seeing if Joe Pineapples can bring down Blackblood like he does in the comics. And Rojaw's might be the smallest A.B.C. warrior, but his sculpt is full of attitude. Only 2 boxes left now. Let's take a look at the Rogue Marsokhods next. This box comes with 3 of these auxiliary war droids, and they can be painted in many different colors. The box also features a bunch of different head options to choose from. For my first variant, I used Tamiya Clear Yellow through the airbrush. Next up, I tried Tamiya Clear Blue. And finally, I went for Tamiya Clear Red. I used the same red colors as previously mentioned to paint their eyes, except on the droid with red armor, where I used the yellow colors from Blackblood's fringes instead. This sculpt also features some star symbols that I painted in the same way as before. Well, that was super quick and easy. Since I stuck with a single paint for each of these, instead of creating new hues by mixing colors together, I think I was able to achieve quite vibrant results that make the Marsokhods stand out in a nice way. I saved my personal favorite for last, as the final box contains Mek Quake, the mentally unstable ex-bulldozer who loves big jobs. This is the tallest of all the miniatures released so far, and I just love the sculpt. His eyes and the glowing spheres on his back were painted in the same way as Steelhorn's eyes. The base also features an unfortunate street sweeper caught under the foot of Mek Quake. I'll show you in a future video what colors I used for this. The screen on the chest was painted with Mephiston red, and I also applied a transfer of a Volgan symbol on it. After a coat of gloss varnish, I then used a bunch of different enamel paints from AK Interactive to weather Mek Quake, as well as a few other of the miniatures, as previously mentioned. Using a synthetic brush, I applied these on different parts of the miniature in irregular patterns. I let them dry for a little bit before taking a sponge dampened with white spirits and removing some of the paint. I also used a brush in the same way to create some streaking patterns. That's it for Mek Quake, the miniature I was most looking forward to paint. I think the weathering turned out cool, and his sheer size and intimidating pose makes me really happy to have him in my collection. Besides the miniatures that Warlord Games sent me, I also bought another piece of MDF terrain from Sarissa Precision, the Zone Theta lander pad. I assembled it with PVA glue and used Liquitex modeling paste to stiffen the cardboard elements and fill in the corners where the side panels meet. I then undercoated the floor and roof with Mechanica Standard Grey and the walls with Mephiston Red. Using my airbrush, I highlighted the walls with Evil Sunz Scarlet, followed by Wild Rider Red. The grey floors and roof were painted the same way as Vulkan's altar from the last video. I then used Trollslayer Orange with a sponge on the walls, followed by Rhinox Hide in the same way. After this, I painted the bottom of the vents with Abaddon Black and dry brushed some Rhinox Hide around the vents on the walls. At this stage, I airbrushed on gloss varnish and applied a couple of graffiti transfers. Then I used enamel paints and mineral spirits in a similar way as before and sealed everything with a 1-to-1 mix of matte and satin varnish. I think the terrain works great for this range of miniatures, and the transfers from the starter box really helps tie everything together. It was a complete joy painting these A.B.C. warriors and Volgan War droids. I especially enjoyed the bigger ones, like Mongrol, Steelhorn, and Mek Quake. Wave 1 and 2 contain some excellent sculpts, and I can't wait to see what's in store for Wave 3. If you're interested in checking out these miniatures for yourself, please use our affiliate link to Warlord Games in the description down below. Thanks again to Kieran and the rest of the team for sending us these miniatures and for supporting the cabin. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Good luck with your miniatures.